What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. Welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. So I've got a really good guest here. I was just sitting here talking to Shawn Medina, and we were talking about, so a lot of you can probably figure out we're starting to get kind of a routine going here. I've got great guests on that refer me to great guests. So I had Robert Riley II on, and we were talking the other day, and he said, you need to talk to Shawn. Shawn's a cool guy. He's gotten through a lot, made it on the other side. So anyway, Shawn Medina, welcome in, man.
Thank you.
Shawn and I were just, we were just, before we got on, we were at Leavenworth, but not at the same time. But Shawn was at the big house, and I was at the small house, the little house. So I only got to go in there a couple of times, and it was a little bit different than where I was down at the camp. But so Shawn, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Thanks for coming by. I'm glad you made it into the podcast studio, the Nightmare Success Studio. We usually do this if you're not, if somebody's not in town, we got to do it by Zoom, but we're just right here. Here we are.
Yeah, I don't like this.
And then we just realized that you had the wrong headphones.
Yeah.
We do a sound check. I said, "Can you hear me?" And Shawn said, "No, I can't hear you." I was thinking, I don't know if I've interviewed anybody else and they just were not. They were just too polite to tell me that they couldn't hear me. But we're good. We can hear each other.
Yeah.
So Shawn, you told me you were a California boy.
Yeah, I was born and raised in San Diego. The way that I ended up, kind of ending up back and forth from San Diego to St. Louis is my dad grew up here. And
your dad was from St. Louis?
Yeah, well, actually, my dad's from Laredo, Texas. All of my dad's side of the family is from Texas, and my mom's side is all from California. But my grandparents came up here when my dad was a little kid, and he grew up here. Anyways, he ended up enlisting in the Navy, and he was stationed in San Diego. That's where he met my mom. And
makes sense. That's how it happened. Yeah. San Diego. So what was like growing up for you as a kid? Mom, dad, siblings? So
my dad split when I was I guess 2.5.
Yeah.
So I grew up with my mom, more so with my grandparents than my mom. She was a pretty heavy, drug abuser, and so we did a lot of hopping around, a lot of back and forth.
Did you know that as a kid, though, Shawn? What? How did you come to know that? At what point does a kid at a certain age realize that something's not quite right?
I mean, definitely whenever my sister and I were, getting taken out of our home and put in foster care, that was kind of
that was a real red
ding,
flag.
Ding. Yeah, red flag for sure.
How old would you have been then?
I was probably about 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
That had to feel really weird, didn't it?
It was.
Because you look for, the safe place, be your home,
mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden you're uprooted and you don't know what the unknown is.
Yeah. And I think that was the first kind of time period where, we were kind of forced to realize the fact that my mom was using drugs, and it wasn't just, it was strange that we moved around so much. Right. You know what I mean? It was all kind of just normal to us, really.
Because you didn't know any different.
Yeah, we didn't know any different. And, that was definitely.
So do you remember, going into foster care at 9, 10 years old? What was that like?
It was super weird. It kind of happened from our neighbor in our apartment calling the police because she, realized there was something going on.
Yeah.
And she realized that because my sister and I would be sitting out on the front porch of our apartment till like 2:00 in the morning, like pretty much every night, waiting for my mom and her boyfriend to get back home and let us in the house and stuff. And but anyways,
how old would your sister have been? Like, or was she younger?
She's
or older?
2 years older than me.
Okay, so she's a little bit older.
Yeah, and so they showed up and kind of ran us through the process. Started out at the police station, then to some I guess temporary.
Did they split
facility.
You guys up?
No, they didn't split us up.
That's good.
Yeah, and but yeah, it was terrible. You know what I mean? It was like I was already a pretty timid little kid.
Yeah, and
all of that just unknown was super uncomfortable for me.
I just can't imagine at that age what that would be like, because I mean, when you're coming, 9 or 10 years old, you're, what is that, fourth grade, third, fourth?
Yeah,
grade?
I think if I can remember, I think I was third grade.
Yeah,
yeah.
And if you were moving around a lot, you probably weren't able to make a lot of connections with kids because you were moving.
Nah, you know what? My best friend when I was, that age was actually the kid that lived across the street from my grandparents' house, Manuel. We called him Miho.
Miho.
Yeah, that was pretty much my only, like kind of grounding point was when we were actually living with my grandparents.
Well, so Shawn, how did that work? So you got picked up, got into the foster care. At what point, like, can the grandparents and the relatives and that type, how can they get involved in that, or did they get involved in that?
From what I remember,
I'm kind of familiar with how that foster thing works. I mean, can a grandparent say, "I'll take them," or do they have to go through the system too?
So that's not what ended up happening. When I say my grandparents' house, either like all of us were living with them, like my mom included, different time periods.
So everybody was together.
Yeah. Okay. And, but like whenever the foster thing happened, like we ended up getting placed in a home with somebody random family for a time period. And then my mom was able to get us back.
Okay. But
shortly after that, we were shipped off to my dad, who I'd never met before in St. Louis.
In St. Louis,
yeah.
Wow.
And that was...
What was that like? Because this is a guy you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're going to an unfamiliar land in the middle of the country.
Yeah, I talked to this dude like once a year on my birthday.
Yeah.
And, if I can remember, like, it's like I'm always getting put on the phone with this guy like once or twice a year, and I just can't wait to get off the phone. You know what I mean? That's what I remember from it. And then we show up to the airport, and I'm like, I'm kind of looking around, and then there's this like crazy looking biker looking long ponytail Mexican dude standing in the middle of everybody, and I'm like, fuck, tell me that's not my dad. You know what I mean?
And it was.
And it was, yeah, that dude was my dad.
So how did all that go? Because you had to be kind of weirded out as a kid. Like, this. I'm in a new world. I'm with a guy that
had never been on a plane before.
Never been on a plane. You show up, the guy that you don't want to be your dad is your dad.
Yeah, scariest looking dude.
Yeah. So was there a connection?
Man, it was...
Because you were, what, 10 years old, 9 years old?
Yeah, I was like 9. And, like, I remember he walked up to us both, and, like, he, like, bear hugged us, and I swear I thought he was going to pop my head off of my body. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean? Like, so... I'm going to put this into perspective. Like I was used to living, like I didn't know what poor was, but we were poor in California. Right.
Yeah.
And, but it's hard to tell you're poor in California because everything's beautiful everywhere.
Right, it's the beach world.
Yeah. And then, so, like we leave
a lot different than being poor in Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We leave the airport going to get into this piece of shit old truck. and drive to my dad's house. And like, I've never even seen a red brick building before. Yeah. And we're like down on like state streets, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
so I was like, this sucks. You know what I mean? It was a bummer.
Shawn, how did this time period, how did you stay with your dad for years?
So we pretty much didn't, once we got to St. Louis, I pretty much didn't hear from my mom for another 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. And,
did you, so you didn't hear like a phone call, nothing? You just didn't hear from her?
Nah, she just, you know, she was in a really bad spot, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The dude she was with was like,
bad.
Total like mental and physically abusive dude, you know, to her.
And you guys were
to
into all
her
that.
And us. Yeah. He was dude sick, you know what I mean? Like,
Shawn, you had a rough start, man.
Yeah, it was it was kind of a bummer. I just, you know, today I thank God for like my grandparents, you know what I mean? Because they were like the only
touchstone.
Yeah, that was it. You know, they were great.
Yeah.
But yeah, St. Louis, my dad's, you know, he's always been a pretty good alcoholic, you know, very abusive to his, they weren't married, but they'd been together, you know, might as well have been his wife, my stepmom, Jamie. And, you know, that's pretty much what I saw for the next 4 years was drinking and abusing, you know what I mean? Kind of,
what was school like? Well, I mean, I guess you got into a new school and school life. Did you remember any of that?
School was...
Were you able to make any connections in that world? Not really?
Nah. You know what I mean? Like...
It was just you and your sister. You were kind of together.
Yeah, we... I don't know. I feel like my sister did a lot better than me. You know what I mean? I was still kind of really introverted. It was a huge culture shock for me. You know what I mean? Like... You know, I just honestly, you know, I never really felt, you know, like I fit anywhere, you know, growing up, you know, to be honest, you know. So
what was your next step? What happened next?
So like I said, we didn't hear from my mom for about 4 years, but by the time we did hear from her, you know what I mean, like living with my dad, we were like, okay, cool. Yeah. She calls one day. She's like, hey, I want you guys back. You know, do you guys want to come live with me? And we're like, get us the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Like, and we were gone.
So you packed up and left.
Yeah, we both went back.
How old would you have been there? Like 14?
Yeah, I think I was like, so I think I was like 13.
Yeah.
And we headed back. And honestly, like that time period was probably like, the most fun for me because I was like 13 years old. What ended up happening was my mom got like hit by a car or something and she got a settlement. And so she had gotten like this, you know, little house that was, little house down in the beach area in Pacific Beach in, San Diego. And so
life felt kind of good.
we went back there. We could walk to the beach. You know what I mean? She was still up to her same bullshit. You know what I mean? Like,
did she seem different at all? Did she seem like, or did it seem exactly like? Was she still with the guy that was the bad guy?
No.
So he was gone.
He was gone. So you know
that was good.
Yeah, that was definitely at least a step in the right direction. She had already. By then, I had 2 new sisters.
Okay.
And but she had already lost custody of them.
Okay.
And but so anyways, it was me and my older sister. We're down at the beach, you know, and like I said, my mom's still up to the same shit. She's still getting high. She's, you know, she would like.
Were you frustrated with her, Shawn?
Man, I didn't care at that point.
You just didn't
know
care.
What I mean? Like,
you had a place to live. You were close to the beach.
Yeah, she would pop in, you know what I mean? Like, and
you
pop
were
out for like weeks
basically
at a
for
time.
Yourself.
Yeah. She would drop off like some bags of potatoes and oranges every once in a while. And, you know, we pretty much
like, what was your world like? I mean, did you work? Did you go just kind of?
Yeah, I was in school. You know what I mean? Like, I went to school so I could eat. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, when I wasn't in school, I would just like, I I remember I would like just go walking through the grocery store and just picking shit and eat it. You know what I mean?
What about clothing and stuff? Like, do you remember how that all happened for you? Did your grandparents help?
Yeah, so we were in San Diego, so that's where my grandparents, lived, and they did what they could. They would come in and check in on us and pick us up and take us shopping for clothes and stuff like that. And
that's good.
So we weren't living with them, but she didn't really know that my mom wasn't there most of the time.
Okay.
Otherwise I'm sure she probably would have snatched us up.
Yeah.
But, we were like at a certain age. My sister had like met a boyfriend, you know what I mean? Like she was hanging out and I was running around with a bunch of little cholo kids, you know what I mean? We were running around doing hood rat shit, having fun, at the beach. So
yeah,
it wasn't that bad.
Right. It was just that you knew it was a lot better than where you were in St. Louis.
Yeah.
So it felt better.
Mm-hmm.
So then how did you get into the world of getting more into, what would you say, trouble?
So, I was always getting into, I was doing things that would have got me into trouble.
Yeah.
But I wasn't actually getting into trouble.
You weren't getting caught.
I wasn't getting caught until like I turned old enough to go to jail.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is super convenient, you know what I mean? But yeah, I was already, before, I don't know, I said like, I'd say probably like around 16, 17, I was like hanging out with friends, started doing like acid and, stuff like that. And then eventually, turned into hanging out with people who were doing like crystal meth and stuff like that. And that's kind of what like locked me in for the ride. You know what I mean? So
it's, I've had so many different guys that I've had conversations with within crystal meth. And in fact, I had a guy on here, Kyle Kilasing, he was, I think, the number 4 golfer in the world as a teenager. And all of his different friends got into it, and it kind of became the capital in his area for crystal meth in Hawaii, and he lost everything. I mean, he's literally lost everything. And it's interesting how one type of drug can take somebody down such a dark path where they, it's almost, in some cases, immediate. But what was it with you? How did it work with you?
And what's crazy is like I would do pretty much anything out there except for that because of my mom. You know what I mean? That's what she was doing. Yeah. And I was like, fuck that shit.
Yeah, that's the bad stuff.
I'm not messing with that stuff.
Yeah, and taboo.
Then eventually, I ended up doing it. But unfortunately for me, it was like, in the very beginning, that was what kind of like flipped a lot of things for me that I didn't like about myself. You know what I mean? Like,
because you say you were introverted, so I'm sure when you were doing those type of things, you became an extrovert of some sort, which probably gave you some escape of some sort.
Yeah. And then also, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of took me out of like feeling like a victim all the time. You know what I mean? It kind of
had some power.
Yeah. It gave me like, it kind of like, I ended up in a lot of situations where, it forced me to realize other things that I was capable of, which are not very good, not good, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you don't kind of where you realize that, you don't have to be the victim about shit, and you can, kind of take
action.
Yeah.
Or take control.
And,
I guess you're talking about control, really.
Yeah.
Power of control. Yeah.
Yeah. And, but that was, basically when all of the little stuff turned into bigger stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think the first time I went to jail was, I got arrested for trying to shoot somebody at a fucking school. You know what I mean?
That'll do something.
And, that was like, a situation that just got out of hand because it was like I was super irrational because I was like coming down off of meth or some shit like that, and it escalated. And, you know, it just kind of snowballed from there.
So how, on your nightmare of catching your federal charge, what happened?
I mean, I was just hanging out with some people who were, you know, like making meth, and honestly, we weren't doing anything but like supporting a habit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
it's the way a lot of the guys were that I was with at Leavenworth is they were the lowest hanging fruit because they were the users.
Yeah.
The people that they were giving and doing it so they could distribute. Those guys had themselves well insulated. Yeah,
we were just you know what I mean? We were just like surviving, you know, day to day and getting high kind of. And you know, like the guy who the main guy who I was hanging out with, I guess, you know, I think I told you before, was like he got busted like for small shit a couple times, I think, and I think, you know, this time I just happened to be lucky to be there, and they were sick of dealing with this dude, and they're like, oh, we can scrape together enough people in this kind of scenario to call it a federal thing,
right? And federal conspiracy of drugs. Yeah.
So
you got wrapped up in it, on a guy that they were tired of,
and you know, I had like and there were no, like, when we got busted, there were no drugs. There was some clean glassware, and I happened to have like a hotel room key on my possession where that stuff was. And like the hotel room wasn't in my name or any of that stuff. Like if it would have been a state case, like never, I wouldn't have, you know, it would have been like a book and release for me and I'm done, you know, because they wouldn't even messed with it. But
they had it targeted to do, and you were part of it.
And I ended up doing more time out of any of them, because, you know, like, as you know, they use priors to increase your points. Yeah. And I had more of a criminal history than any of those guys.
Well, the unfortunate thing about that is when you have more points, then you end up in a harder place too.
Yeah.
And when you got, you know, through that process and were arrested and finally ended up in a courtroom, and then they sentenced you to what, 62 months?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
What was your thought? I mean, what, like, were you thinking? Because, you know, in Fed time, that's real time. That's not like 10% of it's like 6 months.
And then if you're like me, you know, it's 85% or whatever. Yeah. But if you're like me, you know, you're doing all of it. Right. You know what I'm saying? But I remember when the first time I went to court, in the federal building, and they took me into the courtroom, and I looked around, and everything was like so nice. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, fuck, I messed up this time. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't the normal courtroom. You know what I mean? Right. And but yeah, so I was like, that was kind of, you know, I was like, man, I'm in trouble. And then, you know, like, my attorney came and talked to me, and he was like, listen, man, like, everybody's getting 10 years, like nothing, nobody, you know what I mean? So I want you to prepare
hand out 10-year minimums like candy.
Prepare yourself for that. And I was like, that sucks, but, you know, it is what it is. You know, I kind of just, you know, I you know, kind of live a life of forcing myself to be okay with whatever's happening.
Kind of compartmentalizing.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And then, so whenever I got, you know, the 62 months or whatever, I was like, oh, I was feeling like good about it.
That's about half of what you were being told you were going to get.
Yeah, I was not mad about it. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, you have to take some responsibility for.
So did you? Because you know, you and I were talking before we started the interview, and you know, did the jail part of being locked up is the worst part? How long did you have to do the jail part?
So.
In fact, we just found out both of us had been in Warrenton, which is a terrible place.
Yeah, originally, so I was in Warrenton for when I went back on my violation, but originally I was out in Steelville.
Okay.
And Cornbread County, I think is what they called it.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being very good.
And it was a hard time for me out there, because there was like this one big fat redneck CEO that was like
making everybody's lives terrible.
Yeah, and like, I wasn't like,
it only takes one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the other guys can be asleep at the wheel, and that one guy is the guy that can make hell on earth.
Yeah. And I'm too stupid to realize that, you know, I'm only going to make things harder on myself by, you know, like acting a certain way. But, you know, I was very vocal about how I felt about the dude. And so they kept me, you know what I mean? Like, locked up most of the time, you know what I mean?
So you were kind of in your own solitary confinement.
Yeah, no day room, none of that stuff, because anytime they would let me out, I'd be kind of like blowing on the cops, you know, so.
Kind of made your time harder.
Yeah, and it was like, I got to a point where I was seeing people that came, that had already went to court like after me, leaving to go to prison, so I was getting super frustrated about that. I had already been sitting there for like 8 months. And, like, I was starting to get pretty pissed off, and it just wasn't helping anything. But finally, you know, like about 8 months later, after sitting there for 8 months anyways, they came and got me.
So they were going to pack up. But then the pack up's not that easy, because like you were talking to me about, you went through Oklahoma. Yeah. And that's like a cattle herd of people. How long do you have to spend in that transport?
I think I was only in Oklahoma for... about, you know, somewhere around 2 weeks. Yeah. But, you know, it's crazy because at that point you still don't know
where you're going.
You mean you're not, yeah. And you figure, you know, you find out somewhere in that time that you're going where you're going, and the place where I ended up going was like
bad,
shitty. Yeah. It was
you went to a Max.
Yeah, it was
Terre Haute
USP. Yeah, that place was like a slaughterhouse, man.
Yeah,
like,
well, tell me about going in. I mean, because I've heard so many different things. Like, what was when you entered that place? What was your world? Can you walk us in there?
So first of all,
I've heard people call it like Gladiator School of Survival.
And then it's like it was the newer Terre Haute. It wasn't the old one, you know, like just like Leavenworth, they turned the old one into a medium and then built a new one. Yeah. And, well, they didn't build a new Leavenworth. But
not a new Leavenworth, but they did build a new Fort Leavenworth prison, which I did get to see that, but that's not where you were.
Yeah. No, and then the Terre Haute USP was also where they had like the death row for the federal system, I guess. Yeah. But anyways, brand new prison, 40-foot walls. Yeah. Everything's. I remember thinking one of the worst things about it was everything's gray. The walls are gray. Yeah. If it's like a shitty day outside, the sky's gray. And you know what I mean? Like if you're out on the yard and looking at everything's
gray.
Everything's gray. It's just so fucking depressing, man. But like I remember the first time that I actually went out on the yard there. We walk out, and you know, like you know, I'm from California, so I find my people from California, and you know what I mean? Like they're showing me, you know, because everything's segregated.
Set up. Yeah.
They're showing me, you know, which handball courts I can play on, and you know, all that bullshit, and
which is all really important, because you know that's how you set up in your world. You know, you find your people, they get you set up. They, you know, you find out what the inmate rules are, because the prison rules don't mean anything. It's the inmate rules, so you get set up into figuring out how to navigate this new world you're in.
Yeah, and you know, it's like first time out on the yard, shit cracks off. You know what I mean? There's full scale riot jumps off. I think it was between like the DC blacks and the natives or something. And but like literally, I'm trying to figure out where it's okay for me to be and where it's not. And
as
like
this is going down,
they're just blowing tear gas all over the place and shooting rubber bullets. And it was
So what was your thought, Shawn? How am I going to handle this crazy new world? Did you have anything rolling around in your mind, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to?
I mean, I think at first I was just trying to get. You have to like familiarize yourself with your surroundings, and like understand that like you're in a situation where it's not, there's no fist fights anymore. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like if there's an altercation, it's a knife fight. You know what I mean?
Somebody's
like
getting stabbed.
Yeah, and like you have to understand, you have to figure out people's mindsets, because like when I was at Terre Haute, 80% of the population had either 30 years or better, or weren't going home at all.
Yeah.
And so,
which is a whole different way of doing your time when you know you're not getting out.
Yeah, most of these people don't have anything to lose. So, you know what I mean? If you step on their toe in any way, you could be, you could be looking,
you accidentally bump into somebody, and that whole thing, that there was a little bit of that, I think there's a little bit of that in every prison.
Yeah.
It's that space, that people have that invisible, what do you call that? Just your own personal space around you. And if you bump into that, it can cause something.
Yeah. You better say, excuse me.
Yeah. A lot of respect goes along with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you, because I just know from being in the prison world, you became a tattoo artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of those things that's really sought after. And those guys almost live like kings. Because you didn't know how to do that going in. I think it's really kind of fascinating how you made that work, because that would have also been an outlet for you to be somebody having a different way of doing your time too. So how did that all come about for you? You
know what? And honestly, I think that's the first time in my life I actually made a conscious decision to put a plan in action to where I could use, hopefully,
and execute it on
hopefully in the future. You know what I mean? I just kind of looked at it like, all right, I got this certain amount of time. Like I've always been interested in this.
Were you kind of an artist?
Yeah, I grew up, kind of like escaping all the shit that I didn't want to deal with.
That was your escape.
Yeah,
drawing.
Like I was drawing, the whole time I was growing up, and never with any kind of like, solid foundation or anything like that. I kind of just
your thing.
Just looked at stuff, kind of replicated it, you know, that kind of thing. And,
probably knew you had a little bit of a talent for that.
Yeah. I kind of recognized that I could do what some other people couldn't do,
right?
And but then I got into that mind frame where I'm like, I'm gonna figure this shit out. And man, some of those people that I figured it out on, I feel bad for them.
But you said they didn't mind it,
man. There's
when you were trying to figure it out, that they were pretty happy with it.
There is no shortage of dumbasses in prison, that's for sure. But yeah, man, I didn't know. Like, I think the biggest hurdle I had to overcome, and I could have just asked somebody.
But how did you go about, like, to be a tattoo artist? You got to have your stuff too. Like, how did you get that to do that?
So, a lot of times, you'll either, you'll just kind of like put the word out, hey man, I'm looking for this, and people just, they either have it or they can get it for you. A lot of things come from
kind of like Red and Shawshank. I can get you.
Yeah, I can get that. Yeah. But a lot of stuff comes from like the maintenance department. You know what I'm saying? Like they'll go. I don't think a lot of people realize like how much like the actual day-to-day systems of a prison are dependent on the actual inmates or convicts. You know what I mean?
Well, it's totally run by them.
Yeah.
If you think about it, Shawn, because I've had a lot of different discussions about this, because that was maybe one of the biggest surprises to me about going to prison is I thought it was all run by COs.
Yeah. They don't do shit.
They don't do anything but count. In theory, if there's fights and stuff, they'll break it up. But mostly they're really, really concerned about count.
Yeah.
Count time is, they have a hard time with that.
Yeah, they fuck that up.
They have a really hard time, and it's always our fault.
Yeah.
And it's not, but it is.
Right, yeah.
They get more and more pissed that they can't get it right, and so they're making faces at everybody and yelling at everybody, but that's their biggest thing. Everything else that's going on, just about anything and everything that goes on is done by the inmates.
If the plumbing needs to get fixed, they're not calling in.
No, it's the inmates.
Yeah. And
food, cleaning, cutting grass, everything you could think of, fixing the trucks.
Yeah, besides medical.
You can't get medical.
But yeah, so any of the things like they would do, like they would you know, like do maintenance on like disc drives, DVD players, stuff like that. And, you know, they would go in, you know, supposed to be like fixing this shit, but really they'd be going in and peeling any little parts they could to sell on the compound. You know what I mean? And so, you know, you would get your little motors or whatever.
Do you have a Unicore?
Yeah, I actually worked Unicore.
Yeah, I mean, Unicore had everything. You know, I mean, for those who are listening out in the Cayman Islands, the Unicore was a place where all the government stuff would come out of the offices of all the places in the United States, and then they would go disassemble them in Unicore, take them apart. But the prisoners were really good at figuring out what worked, what didn't work, and what could be used. Which it was almost its own little manufacturing plant of all little things. Because, I mean, we had like movie night, and somehow they would figure out these movies and get first-run movies off of those little thumb drives or whatever. I don't know how the hell that happened, but that was always interesting.
It was funny. I forget about Unicore sometimes, but I actually worked Unicore, and like my line in the factory, like we actually got the whole prison locked down for a minute because they were like, it was like where they went from paying us a certain amount, they were switching it over to piece rate, and we were doing like the Marine dress shirts and stuff like that, the uniforms and bags and stuff like that. Well, it switched to like piecework, and my job was like the hardest job on the whole shirt. You know what I mean? It was putting the collars on.
Okay.
And as far as like, it's the most time consuming. You know what I mean? So we couldn't make shit. And so we're like, nah, we're not doing this. You know what I mean? Like, and we got together and we're like, we're not coming to work no more.
You kind of went on a strike.
yeah, we went on a strike, and they locked the prison down.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And,
they don't like that.
Yeah, and they locked the prison down, hoping that like the other inmates were gonna be like, hey, you motherfuckers, like we're trying to get out to the yard. But that's not what happened. They don't care. You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, fuck those guys. You know what I mean? And but yeah, so it was like, I think they had us locked down for like a whole week. And then they were like, all right, you know, they finally softened up, and they're like, what do you guys want to come back to work?
Did you do this at Leavenworth, or did you do it at Terre Haute?
This was at Terre Haute.
Okay.
And they were like...
Because, you know, the only reason why I say that is whenever you guys did that stuff at Leavenworth...
It affected the...
Yeah, because we had to make food for you. They called them bag nasties, and they get all the guys in the kitchen, and they just... the whole complex and make all these little bags, it'd be like peanut butter and jelly and whatever else, and then we'd throw them into this big truck. So I worked at the food warehouse, and then we'd back that big truck in there, and we'd drop these big bags off because you guys were all locked down.
Yeah.
And it was quite a deal.
Yeah. But, yeah, so no, this was at Terre Haute.
Yeah.
But anyways, so you know, they're like, all right, like I said, they were trying to soften up, and they're like, what do you guys want to come back to work? Because you can't, it's a process to teach somebody how to do this part of the shirt. It's not easy. And so they're like, we're going to take them. We're going to be down for a minute if we have to teach all dudes.
This and retrain. Right?
And so they're like, what do you guys want to come back to work? And we got them to like give us the, you know, better pay for the
so you guys piece. Really did get something out of stopping work.
Yeah, and also more important than the pay, we made them they actually printed us out like an apology letter.
You're kidding?
No, I'm serious. They printed us out an apology letter.
It's unheard of.
And then and then so like we agreed to go back to work. I never went back to work, but
so that was it for you.
Yeah, that was it.
That was it for Unicore.
Yeah.
What other kind of prison job do you have besides Unicore? Because
that was it.
That was it. So then you kind of did your own thing probably with the tattooing and
yeah. So like when I was still at Terre Haute, you had to have a job. So like my counselor was cool.
You probably had to have a job at Leavenworth too, didn't you?
I think so.
I think they just require you to have a job.
Yeah, and
regardless of what the job is.
But they would give you like for me once I started like primarily tattooing most of the time, I would get like a in the unit job, like wiping down the phones or something. I would never do that shit, but you know what I mean.
Or you could have, because you're a tattoo artist and you're prison rich, you could have other people do that for you.
Yeah, you could do that.
You could have other people make your bed. You could have people do your laundry. You could have a lot of people do as a tattoo artist.
Yeah, it was definitely probably as close to, like you said earlier, a celebrity as you
it is.
Get.
I mean, it's at the top of the food chain.
Yeah, and then if you're like. honestly, by the time I hit Leavenworth, I started getting pretty good at it. You know, I could say for prison tattooing, I was pretty good at it. I was doing like quality portraits.
You left the Terre Haute guys back there with some funny looking tattoos, but you got good at Leavenworth.
Funny looking skin. They had some scars to deal with for sure. It wasn't pretty at all. But yeah, by the time I got over,
because you don't really want to mess up somebody when you're in prison, because they can come back on you. But it must not have been that bad.
Yeah, I mean, they signed they signed the disclaimer. They knew what they were. But yeah, I mean, you can't.
Tell me about Leavenworth, because I know a little bit about Leavenworth because just walking in there, and I mean, you and I were talking about this before. It's 1879 prison, so it's ugly. Old. Yeah. What's your thoughts walking into that place?
It was fucking great.
Yeah, you liked it.
I loved it, dude. It was great. Like the COs, a lot of the COs were still COs, you know, that had been there forever.
Yeah.
And so they don't care about a lot. You know what I mean? Like,
just letting time go.
Yeah, they're just collecting a check, doing their thing. And then I got placed in B upper, which anybody who has been to like USP Leavenworth, or, you know, it's actually a medium, but it's still called USP Leavenworth. B upper's the place to be. You know what I'm saying? That's like going back to the hood. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it's I think it's like I can't remember.
You were saying that the yard was a lot smaller for you, but
yard was smaller. The unit was like the size of a city block. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it just went on forever. And, you know, it was like the old tier style, you know what I mean? Like,
I've seen pictures of it. They have pictures of it over at the OTC, which is where the Officer Training Center is. So they have all the pictures of the inside. But the only part I ever saw was when we backed up the truck to the loading dock there and we take it off. And I just remember that the floors were super, super shiny. Yeah. And that the inmates could only walk on the sides. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. They definitely kept the floors pretty good and polished. But it was a super old prison, had a lot of good hiding spots.
Was Warden May there when you were there, or was not? Because Warden May was the black warden that was, he was really into cleanliness, but if you got out in 2010, he was probably not there yet or already gone. But actually, when I was there in 2014, he left in 2017. So I don't know how long he'd been there. Those guys came and went more than I thought.
I remember we did, before I went home, we got a new warden. He was a black guy. I bet it was Warden May. It might have been him.
He was real big on doing Friday checks on, you know, if you had your bed made military style and all kinds of stuff.
Things went downhill after he got there for sure. But it was, from where I came from, it was nice. You know, it was like going, comparatively, it was still prison, but it was like you felt going from prison to a hotel.
It was a better, just all around better.
Yeah, you could
better neighborhood.
Just to put it into perspective, like when you were cruising around Terre Haute, like you kept a knife on you. When you were cruising around Leavenworth, you kept a knife on you when you knew something was going down. You know what I mean? And that was pretty much, you know, the rest of the time was
pretty
easy time.
Laid back.
Yeah. But you know, it was still prison, but
you'd gotten used to it too. I mean, that's the other thing is that, and I've heard that Terre Haute is not a place you want to stay very long. But and I've heard Leavenworth, you know, because Leavenworth did go from a maximum to medium, and that all happened because of the hurricane down there in New Orleans, and they had to redistribute everybody, and so that it became a medium overnight. But they still like to refer to it as a USP.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was, from what I understand, it was still pretty rocking before they.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. And you know, the other thing that's unusual about Leavenworth is down at the camp level, you usually don't have fence or anything, and they had tried to make that a low back, I think, in 1990 or 91 or something like that. And so they fenced it and did all the stuff that you do with the sally port coming in and out. Yeah. And that big entrance, and they didn't do it. So you got a camp down there with everything that's double fenced and barbed wire and everything. But it didn't really matter because we could walk to where we were going to Unicor or the food warehouse. But
yeah,
a lot of those guys stayed in the fenced area the whole time, which always surprised me because, you know, you could, if you had a job, you could go outside the fenced area.
Yeah.
So when you start getting closer, Shawn, to the door of your time, because I'm sure you probably got some time in the hole for, did you get time in the hole for doing your tattoo stuff or not?
I never for tattoos. I got busted for like alcohol and knives and stuff like that. And yeah, I spent.
How much time you have to spend in the hole?
Man, I would say probably out of the whole time, I probably spent about a year of it in the shoe.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Not continuously.
No, but in and out.
Yeah.
Did you
at Leavenworth, it was a lot easier because, like you said, I mean, it was a nastier.
Yeah.
It was old and gross, super gross shoe. You know, but you know, like you said about the whole tattooing thing, like when I went back to the shoe, I had people were sending me back coffee and you know all the shit that you weren't supposed to have. And it was kind of like you know,
make it work.
Yeah, it was a lot more doable for me. You know.
So were you thinking as you were getting closer to the door, getting out, you know, those I don't know, what is that, like 6 months of you don't really even think about it, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, I'm getting out, I'm going back into society. What was going through your mind?
It's funny you say that because that happened, you know, a couple times for me because you know I would get in trouble and then lose good time. To the point to where I had lost all my good time.
You're doing your whole time.
I'm doing my whole time. I'm not getting any halfway house. Lost my halfway house. So I did 100% of my time. And so I kind of went through those changes a couple different times. And I was like...
Getting geared up.
Yeah, and getting geared up. Like, all right, man, I'm getting close. And then
they had to tack on months or a year.
Yeah. And so... you know, for me... I don't think I was really that affected by it until I actually got home. You know what I'm saying? Like
what happened the day you got out? Who got you? How'd you get out? I mean, where'd you walk to? Like, did you get on a bus? Did you?
So
somebody pick you up?
One of the guys from the camp came and got me,
which is always kind of weird because people probably don't know this, but there is a town driver that is a prisoner that drives all around Leavenworth and takes people to bus stations and trains and goes and picks stuff up.
Yeah, so that's what happened.
So he drove you to the bus station?
Yeah, the bus station in whatever part of Kansas that is. And or I don't remember. Does they take you over to Kansas City?
Might have.
I think it was Kansas City.
Yeah. Which isn't very far away. You know,
and then I took, you know, I got the bus home.
Yeah.
And then, so, yeah, now I'm free.
So you're free. And you're not in halfway house, so you've done all your time.
Yeah, straight home.
Which is kind of a blessing, Shawn, because you don't want to go to the Dismas house.
Yeah.
The Dismas house is not a good place to hang out. So the fact that you did get in trouble and you had to do your whole time, that's the only thing I could probably say.
I heard people were violating before they even got out of the Dismas house and going back to prison before they even actually got completely out of there.
Right.
Yeah, so that place probably wasn't for me either.
No, it's in the worst part of town, and there's gunfighting and drugs and prostitution all on the very front doorstep. It's not good.
Yeah.
It's about 100 to 150 guys locked down behind a glass lockdown.
Yeah.
So it's not great.
I was still, while I was in prison, I was still drinking and doing drugs and stuff. So like going to the halfway house, I probably
would have been a good situation.
Definitely not. I remember I got home. My dad picked me up from the bus stop.
Yeah.
And
had you been staying in touch with him?
Barely.
Yeah.
Barely. I think I used up pretty much any of the phone time that I had calling, because I have a son who lives with his mom in San Diego.
Okay, so how old would he be? I completely skipped over this. How in the world did I miss this?
I mean,
So when you went in, how old would your son would have been?
He was 2.
Okay.
Yeah, so I missed I missed a lot. You know, it's weird because, you know, history kind of repeats itself, and
it does.
I'm sure he was dealing with the same thing I was dealing with.
Sure.
This fucking guy calls me once in a great while, and I just can't wait to get off the phone.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know this dude.
Yeah.
You know,
cycle.
And it's crazy. So kind of the same thing. But
so you get home, your dad picks you up. What's your next step into life?
So
because you've kind of come out of prison as somebody who was somebody. I mean, I just know your world had to be kind of like that.
You know, and you know, I was really comfortable with my surroundings.
Gotten used to it. And, you know, now I'm coming back home and I'm back to the same life that I was living that obviously wasn't that great because I'm spending all my time doing drugs. And but, you know, before I went to prison, you know, I was in construction. I was, you know, working for a fire and water restoration company as a carpenter. And, so you had those skills.
And
that's a good paying job.
Yeah.
And hard to find.
So the first thing I try to do is I call up, you know, some companies that I worked for, and they're like, hey man, insurance won't cover you for us. You know what I mean? Like we can't hire you back. They're not going to insure a felon. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, my dad, he was, you know, working for himself at the time. He was doing, you know, remodeling and shit like that. And so I just went to work with him, which was cool. You know what I mean? Like he was paying me good.
Yeah.
And the only problem is that, you know, we had a lot of catching up to do. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
and
probably would have given you time for that.
And so, you know, we got in the habit of going out after work every night, drinking, and that turned into fucking leaving at lunchtime and going and drinking, and you know, just the combination of those bad habits kind of ran the good work dry.
Yeah.
And so this is really where the hard stuff starts happening, because it was really, you know, the transition from prison back home was actually pretty easy for me going, you know, into that. Cause I went kind of straight into a job. My PO wasn't tripping on me cause she knew I was working. But then, you know, the work dries up, and now I look how I do, you know what I mean? And now I have to, you know, go out and try to find a job with somebody who doesn't know anything but the bad about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's more than an extra task.
Yeah. And, I didn't have my own vehicle, or I came back with nothing. And, so now I'm like, and my dad lives in Crestwood at the time, and, you know, there's not the greatest, you know, public transportation in the county. And so, like, anytime I'm trying to go and chase down, like, job leads, it's taking me, like, a full day of traveling on the bus to make it happen. You know what I mean? And most of the time, I'm running into the same thing. You know what I mean? No, we're not going to hire you. We're not going to hire you, you know? And, you know, I was actually listening to your podcast, and I heard you use the word paralysis in a situation. And I remember thinking, like, it took me back to that time period where I was having to fight to look for this job, and that word kind of like was exactly what was happening to me. I remember I would find myself standing in the living room of my dad's house, looking out the front window and just being stuck. Like, I would just be standing behind that window knowing that I needed to get my feet moving out the fucking door to go find a job, and I just could not leave the house.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't do it. Like, I knew that I was wasting my time.
You could feel it.
Yeah.
You were mentally trapped.
Yeah. And I remember, like, I developed, like my hands, my palms would just sweat like crazy during this time period, and it was, like, temporary. You know what I mean? Like, it went away on its own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was just it was a hard time. You know what I mean? It was a super hard time. And but you know, like,
how'd you step out of it? Because a lot of people don't.
Well, you know, it's like things, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't, when you're in those moments, it's hard, and it is hard to step out of, but it doesn't take much to, you know what I mean? You just need like a little glimmer of something positive, you know what I mean? And I think I ended up, getting on with another guy that I used to work for a long time ago. My dad used to work for a long time ago. Yeah, ended up, you know, he ended up taking me on,
which is always such a huge deal. And I, you know, for those that are listening out there, you know, giving somebody a second chance opportunity when you don't know how much they appreciate that opportunity, because of what you're talking about, Shawn, is that feeling of not going to another shutdown, going to another shutdown, going down to another no, and then somebody, you know, finally said, "No, I'll take you."
Yeah,
I'll do it.
And you know that definitely helped for that time where I needed to just kind of like push through that period, and but at the same time, that kind of situation, that work situation, wasn't one I wanted either. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
taking what you
it was a step down from what I was used to. Yeah. It was not, you know, I'm trying to move forward, not backwards.
But I mean, I think it's a big deal that you took that, because I mean, you got to humble yourself to step into a situation like that too.
Yeah, and then so, you know, at the same time, you know, I'm realizing this isn't what I want. This is not, you know, I'm not heading in the right direction. This is a direction straight back to where I came from. Yeah. I know this. This is,
you can feel it.
You know what I mean? Like, this is the unhappy with what I'm doing, so I'm going to substitute with some drinking and drugs, and you know, it's a straight shot back. You know what I mean? And so I was like, you know, I kind of just came to this point to where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I learned how to do this shit. I had this plan. What happened? How did I forget this plan?
How did I get the detour going?
Yeah. And so I'm like, all right, man, I'm gonna start trying to figure it out. And so I started, you know, making time to go to different tattoo shops in St. Louis. And, you know, I would walk in and kind of, you know, I don't know what to say. You know, I don't know anything about the professional tattoo industry.
You've just been doing a lot of it.
You know what I mean? Like, I have barely even ever, I think I maybe had one professional tattoo on my body, period. Right. Yeah. And it was from a long time ago, you know what I mean? And so I walk in, and I understand today, because this is my career, and
you got a great business,
right? Yeah. And so I walk into these places, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm trying to tattoo. I was tattooing in prison, and that's the last thing anybody ever wants to hear.
That's you don't lead with that.
Yeah, you don't lead with that. And so I got, you know, basically laughed out of a lot of shops. I remember I walked into like probably one of the more probably the most known tattoo shop in St. Louis, and you know, I gave him the, you know, rundown, and it was funny because there was probably a group of about 4 of them standing at the front counter, and as soon as I started getting, you know, like towards the end of the sentence, all of them except for one pretty much turned around and just walked away.
Just left you there.
Just left me. And I remember it pissed me off so bad, and like I'm like coming from a place where it's like ultra violent, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I just want to fuck these guys up.
They don't know that,
and they don't even know, you know what I mean? And this one dude, I wish I knew what his name was. I wish I could remember, because I would definitely, if I can recall, it was like a couple minutes of my life, and so I can't even really recall what his face looked like. But he was like, hey, man, after everybody walked away and just dipped on me, he was like, hey, man, if you're really serious about this shit, this is what you need to do. Like,
so he actually gave you the steps.
Yeah, he was like, don't come in here talking that shit.
Yeah.
And he was like,
so he gave you advice.
Bring in a portfolio of some drawings or some pictures of some tattoos, unless they're terrible.
Yeah.
And and take those with you. And don't say shit about prison. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, here's my stuff.
Yeah, and so
what great advice, though.
Yeah, and so I at least walked out of there with something other than a shitty attitude.
Yeah,
and
kind of a game changer.
Yeah, and then so the next place I went into was the shop that my wife had just opened. Mm-hmm. Obviously, she wasn't my wife at the time.
No. Did you know her at all?
I didn't know her at all, no.
Okay.
And so I walk into this place, and I'm like, hey, man, like, I got these pictures. I actually, one of the things that was cool about Leavenworth is, like, you could, like...
I like that. One of the things that was cool about Leavenworth.
Yeah.
That should be like a T-shirt.
Yeah. They would let you, like Terre Haute, you couldn't do this. You had to take, like, just regular photos, full body photos. You couldn't zoom in on nothing. But Leavenworth, you could zoom in on just a tattoo. Yeah. Like,
so you had that?
Yeah. I had a bunch of pictures. I still have them.
Yeah.
A bunch of pictures of just tattoos. And
so you were able to make a portfolio.
I had a little portfolio.
It's awesome.
And so I went in there with that stuff, and I was like, "Hey, you know what I mean? My name's Shawn.
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out how to tattoo for on a professional level. I've been doing it for a while. Didn't say the whole prison thing right off the bat. This is what I got. And they looked at them, and they were like, "Okay, well, where are you from?" I look different. You know what I mean? I didn't look like I was from St. Louis.
Yeah.
So these, my wife also grew up in California.
So she's a California girl.
Yeah. Well, she was born out here, but then, you know what I mean, like grew up and spent a lot of time out in California. And so that was like,
connection.
Another icebreaker.
Sure.
Talk about a lot of shit, and by the end of the night, she was like, "Well, stop back in whenever you want. You know what I mean? We'll try to help you with whatever we can." Mm-hmm. And it took me like a whole nother month to come back in
to make it work.
Yeah. And but I did come back around, and when I did come back around, she was like, "Hey, what's up, stranger?" You know what I mean? Like, I was like, "Oh, you know what I mean? They remember you."
Yeah.
And it just kind of from there, it was kind of a little bit more solidified. Like, yeah, we'll help you out. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to guarantee you a job, but I'll help you out to figure out this thing, And it was kind of it was a weird dynamic of what was happening at the shop at that time. She opened in 2009. At the time when I had walked in, there was a couple other artists working there. One of them happened to be her husband that she was divorcing.
Okay.
So they were in the middle of, the divorce process.
Yeah.
And, it kind of made it different.
A little dicey.
Yeah, a little different. So I'm trying to, so I'm working this job, this construction job. Any free time I'm coming in trying to learn this shit. It turns into a relationship like pretty quick between my wife and I, who owns the tattoo shop. And so
it's a way to solidify the job, Shawn. Just go in and just make the girl your girlfriend and wife.
Yeah, actually, it was kind of the other way around, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? I didn't really have a lot of choice in the matter, I'll say. Yeah, she kind of just kidnapped me.
She just said, "Here, I've got you."
Yeah. And, but anyways, some shit kind of happened at the tattoo shop, where I kind of had to step in, with the other guys. They were kind of like money issues were happening. People were,
you had to resolve some issues.
I had to resolve some issues. And, I think when my wife realized that there was somebody who was going to have her back instead of take advantage of her, like she had been used to for most of her life, she was like, you get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? And, that kind of wiped out the whole crew.
Yeah. So it was just you and her.
And then it was just me and her. And so then she's like, realized what she did, she did, I think. And she was like, well, I need your help now.
Right.
And I'm still working this job. And so, you know, the next day I'm like, I call up dude. I'm like, hey man, sorry. I appreciate, you know, you helping me out. This is the path I'm going. You know what I mean? And it was really hard in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like my wife and I, we struggled. You know, well,
starting any business is hard. You know, a lot of people see these successful businesses and they think, wow, they got really lucky. Most of the time, it's a lot of struggle to get something going, get momentum, and get business.
I would sit in there we would both sit in there for days and not make a dime. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes we would make $100 in a week. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, we just...
When did it start taking off for you guys? I know you have a successful business now.
So we you know, we kind of just, you know, tried to keep plugging away at it. What really was the turning point for us was we kind of outgrew the store that we were in, the unit that we were in the shopping
different
center.
Location.
Yeah. It was super small. And we ended up, just to, you know, kind of cut the story, you know, a little bit short. We ended up, because there's a whole other aspect of things that happened, but we ended up moving upstairs and street side where we were super visible from Lime and Lindbergh.
So everybody could see it.
And like, as soon as we moved up there, it was like instantaneous business, just like at least tripled right off the bat.
Wow.
And, you know, like most of the people that came in, they were like, we didn't even know a tattoo shop was here. And by that point, it was at least 5 years. You know what I mean? Like kind of getting by.
In that time period, you're growing this business and we're struggling with this business. You've got a brand new world with, your girl from California, who's a St. Louis girl, that you both, how's all that? I mean, did that all, because up to that point, you didn't talk about having a lot of relationships. So this seems like this, when you locked in on, was the real deal.
Yeah. And we, you know, like we went through some stuff too. You know what I mean? Like we went in that time period, we kind of had separated a little bit and, you know, gotten back together. And, I actually, you know, in this time period, I had caught a violation, went back to Leavenworth, and she, you know, kind of...
What was that like?
It was terrible.
I mean, I can't imagine. That's like every man's nightmare, every person's nightmare is to catch a violation and go, and they usually send you back to where you were.
Yeah, I went back to Leavenworth.
How long were you there?
I was there for, well, it's a story, but...
Yeah?
So I got another 6 months, which was not what my PO was trying to give me. She was trying to give me like the full extra 2 years. And, but the judge was like, hey man, take the 6 months and shut the fuck up, you know? And so by the time...
What'd you catch the violation on? What did they throw you back in there for?
I wasn't checking in, like I was missing, because
they just didn't, violations of rules and things that they put in procedure for your supervision.
Yeah. And like like I said, me and my wife had split up for a time period. I kind of went all the way backwards at that point.
Regressed.
Started spending all my time in the bar, started doing drugs again. And then that's when my PO, you know, and first of all, she kind of like gave me way too much information in the first place. Like my PO did. She, you know, let me know, well, you can, if you miss every other drop, then you're going to get like 4 hours of community service. So I knew I could miss, I could be dirty.
She was telling you how to do this.
Yeah, and I could skip it and then just clean up for the next one, and I'd be good. If not, I just wouldn't go. I would never I would never show up if I was dirty, period.
And then
but I would just give community service.
Yeah.
And I would be good. And so I think she kind of got pissed off that you were working the system. I was working her for a while. And then she kind of added some stuff on there to, you know.
But she went back to Leavenworth. I mean, that had to be weird to walk back in there.
It was terrible. So when I had to go back through Oklahoma, when I went back through Oklahoma, it was Christmas time, and this one CEO that was pissed off because he's working Christmas and was treating everybody like shit, and I fucking lost it on his ass because he was like super slow playing us on like our Christmas dinner meal or whatever, and like he was fucking with us, you know what I mean, like. Yeah, literally, you know what I mean. Like,
no, there were guys. There were guys that did. There was a guy that at Leavenworth that took all the stuff that we were supposed to have for our holiday or this Thanksgiving or Christmas, and they had to put it because they had those big bowls. He had put all in that big bowl, and that's how he just made it. As he put everything that was supposed to be served all in that thing and cooked it, and said, "Fuck you guys." I mean, it was like, anyway.
Yeah, it was like that same kind of situation, and I fucking started throwing shit at this motherfucker, and they came. So that Christmas
wasn't good.
Yeah, Christmas Day, I was in the shoe at Oklahoma City.
Yeah. So you got to see the shoe in Oklahoma. Yeah.
And so that sucked. They put me in with some fucking lunatic, and he was driving me crazy the whole time. I was trying not to beat his ass, and
so you made it out of there.
Yeah, got to Leavenworth.
Back to Leavenworth.
And I think that same warden that you were talking about had already switched up, like he had already gotten rid of all the stores and the units, like, you know, the store guys who would stock
everything up.
Yeah, they would stock up all the extra shit so you could buy whatever you want without having to go to the store.
I think that he did all that.
Yeah, gotten rid of all that shit. Because he did it
and he even cleared out like all the 2-man rooms in the camps. You couldn't have anything in there. It was all stripped down to just, you know, the little table thing and your locker, your plastic chair. You couldn't have anything hanging up or anything.
Yeah, he fucking ruined it.
Yeah, he changed it all.
And what else was it? You couldn't, your spending limit, you could only spend a certain amount.
Put limits on it.
So, like, I mean, I didn't even bother tattooing because nobody could pay me anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? Unless they sent it straight to my books. But, I didn't need money anymore because I'm already out here on the streets tattooing and shit.
Well, yeah, and I was thinking, so you go in there for 6 months. How does that work with your relationship coming out? Now you're coming out to are you guys married?
Not yet.
So you're coming out. And I know by talking to Robert that you also go into a really hardcore thing of getting clean. Is that at the same time that you decided all this? No. So you took another step on that. Okay.
So yeah. So I go back to prison. My chick, she rides it out with me. So I come home. This is the time frame. I come home and instantly go right into building the new tattoo shop in the new spot where we're at now.
Okay.
And so that's kind of like when we started.
Start focusing on that.
Yeah. And like I said, as soon as we did that, moved into the new spot, shit starts taking off. And
whole new start.
Yeah. Things are going good. Eventually I ended up taking another dive. Yeah. I'm drinking. I never stopped drinking. You know what I mean? And, that was alcohol has always been my gateway drug. You know what I mean? Like the party's never over. So I'm going to keep drinking, and then, it's going to eventually turn into a good idea.
So what made you come to a fork in the road?
Let's see. So my wife would be taking trips. Actually, my whole family would be taking trips, vacations, or whatever. I would use me working as an excuse to exclude myself from these family events, so I could just be left at home alone to where I could do whatever I wanted. So I would stay at home and either drink and get high. And so, I just fell into this kind of comfort zone, you know, like I didn't need money. Money was good. And, you know what I mean? Like I was kind of just coasting, like in my family life. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't really putting 100% into that. You know what I mean? Kind of just doing the bare minimum on life still. And like I said, you know, I was, you know, excluding myself from these events. And, one of the times when I think they actually went on like a skiing trip to Colorado, and, my whole family went. I stayed home, ended up staying home, drinking, doing a lot of drugs, ended up having like a psychotic episode. Went totally schizophrenic for probably a week straight. Kind of throttled back on the drugs enough to be halfway sane, and then did more. And so it just got worse and worse in about a week's time period. And long story short,
you kind of hit rock bottom on that.
Yeah, and I used to, you know what I mean? Like I used to, you know, have conversations with myself where I'd be like, man, what does my bottom look like? Because I'd always hear of everybody talk about, you know, they hit bottom and shit. Because I had been to meetings and stuff like that. And I was like, man, I don't want to know what my bottom is, because I've already been to prison a bunch of times. Well, not a bunch of times, but several times. You know what I mean? Like, I've already been homeless and neglected. You know what I mean? I've already been all this shit.
Yeah,
so like, what's my bottom? Well, my bottom ended up being going crazy, and thinking that like all of, you know, I had this
paranoid,
you know, thing going on where my whole past good part of my life from prison on was this huge lie. And I'm not going to go into it, but anyways, I ended up going to jail, getting released from jail. The whole time I'm in a psychotic continuous, like I'm seeing shit that's not there. I'm hearing voices the whole time, and they're all saying bad shit to me. You know what I mean? And I ended up leaving jail, going to walking to the Home Depot, pulling a razor off the shelf, and fucking started cutting any fucking artery I could reach in the bathroom of the Home Depot. And like I sat there, and like I have like gnarly scars from my wrist up to my elbow, across the inside of my joints on both arms. Like I even tried getting in my armpits. And like I sat there on top of the toilet, bleeding out into the toilet so I wouldn't get like spotted or anything like that. And then I just kind of, you know, vaguely remember going out, hitting the floor, and then ambulances, and then I got taken to, I guess like a recovery center, a recovery center, not like, you know, just like processing, I guess, you know, to make sure that I was like okay in the head to be
out and about.
Yeah. And so I'm there for 2 days before I actually come back to sanity enough to realize that my wife is still my wife. She's not trying to kill me.
Were you staying up too? I mean,
So you
hadn't probably slept in a long time.
Yeah. And so I come back to reality, and I call my wife. She's obviously fucking been looking for me, freaking the fuck out. Yeah. And then so she shows up to this place, and she sees what I've done to myself. And she's like
freaked out.
Yeah. She's like, I can't do this.
Yeah, it's too much.
And then we go see Robert.
Okay. Robert Riley II, who's on the podcast, who did some incredible things with Narcan and housing and recovery centers. He's a cool guy.
Yeah. And so she's already talked to him. She's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't deal with this dude's shit. Like I said, we've known him since before, you know, my recovery journey. And so he's like, you know, tell me what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, I got in the room with him. He's like, tell me what's going on. and I tell him what I can remember, you know, not of the psychotic episode, but, you know.
No, you know, Robert's been able to connect with so many different people from people I've heard. Can get down on a level. I think he saves a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then, you know, he told me his story, you know, while we're sitting there. And then obviously, you know, for me and him, you know, same with you, like it's super relatable. We've been through the same things.
Right.
And so, you know, he's got these these recovery houses, and so
he let you go in there.
He's like, "Listen, man, come stay at this house.
Yeah.
Give your wife. We're married by then. You know what I mean? Like we had went and got married in San Diego and La Jolla on the beach and shit."
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it was tight, except for the guy in the Speedo that wouldn't get out of our shots. Good. But
it's photobombing.
Yeah, and but so I stayed at the house on Minnesota, and probably one of the biggest factors was the humble factor. You know what I mean? Like at this point, I got shit. You know what I mean? Like I'm not living the same life that I'm used to.
You got
living.
A business and you got things going on.
I got a house. You know what I mean? In a nice subdivision and stuff.
Right.
And it's like now I'm in this
downtown
sober living on a state street.
Yeah.
In a dope set. You know what I mean? Like it's
totally different.
I can walk out the front door and get anything I want.
Right.
And it was super humbling for me. You know what I mean? Like I had to take that shit on the chin. And so I stayed down there for I don't remember exactly how long, but almost immediately another guy that I think Robert was sponsoring at the time, Robert had talked to, and he's like, "Hey man, go," you know, I had already met him through other people and doing other stuff, but he's like, "Hey man, I want you to talk to this dude for me.
Help him out."
And so Phil, you know, like he came and, you know, was hanging out with me. He's like, "Hey man, come to these meetings with me." And he's like, "I'm gonna," you know what I mean? Like, you know, I think you need help. The most important thing is a sponsor. I think I'm, you know, if you're cool with that, like, let's work on that.
It's a whole accountability deal.
Yeah. And so I went through the whole, you know, working the steps with him, and that part was the big change.
That was your deal.
That was the
moment where you thought, I gotta make this, and I'm gonna step into.
Yeah, I did the work.
Yeah.
You know, thank God for Phil.
I just find it always so fascinating, Shawn, how I know it's got to be incredibly difficult to, you know, you're talking about being paralyzed, you know, looking out that window. I'm always so impressed by people who have the story that you have, and you decide at some point, because some people never do. I mean, so you could die, you know.
Yeah.
But you willed yourself, gritted yourself into that world that you wanted. You didn't get a fork in the road. You could have died at the Home Depot. You didn't. But how you can stay and do and keep stepping when it's difficult, because, you know, whatever that is, you know, it's always that there's something where you're wired in. You can be, you know, you can get addicted to something somebody else doesn't get addicted. So you have to try, you know, 3 times as hard not to. Plus, you've got so many things you can fall back on. You know, I had a bad childhood. You know, my dad was this, but you wipe all that out and say, no, I'm just going to do it.
Well, I think I got into a habit through my whole life, you know, of pretending like none of that shit bothered me in the first place.
Right.
So,
wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. But yeah, like I think, you know, I hadn't even processed the thought yet that I almost abandoned my whole family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like my daughter, my younger daughter, she wouldn't even talk to me. And that shit ruined me.
Well, how old is your younger daughter at that time?
So at the time, let's see, she's 19 now.
Yeah.
So I mean, she was I think in junior high school. You know what I mean?
So she just put off. Just not gonna talk. Yeah.
Yeah,
I got daughters. That's really bad when your daughters don't talk to you.
Yeah, dude, that was like, and I would come and talk to Phil because my wife, she was pretty, she was like, I'm not going anywhere, but fuck you, need to fuck what you're feeling. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm right here.
But you need to get your shit together.
But I don't care what you're going through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was that she hit me with that tough love.
Tough love.
Which is what I needed.
Yeah.
But then when my daughter wouldn't speak to me,
that really triggered it.
I had to talk to somebody about that shit.
Yeah.
You know, and Phil helped me work through that. He's like, hey, man, you just, you know, like,
show them.
You have to understand that you don't have control over anything in this world except for what you can do.
Right.
And so,
and you're the only one that can take the step, in the right direction, not anybody else.
Yeah, and
I mean, you got mentors
I made that decision.
and people that can help you, sponsors, but it's you that has to.
Yeah, you have to do the work.
So, how do you feel now?
Dude, I'm fucking blessed.
Yeah.
So the thing, some changes I think that were really good for me. I went through, have you ever heard of, I think it's called EMDR?
I have.
EMDR.
Yeah.
I've had that treatment done. It's like, you know, like a treatment they use commonly for like, you know, PTSD, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing for me to be able to release a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I, like, through doing like, a lot of work, you know, kind of aside from like recovery, but more in like internal shit. I also kind of, you know, like started feeling like a human being for the first time in my life. Cause I realized at that point, you know, that I'd never been happy. Like I didn't know.
You compartmentalized it.
Yeah.
You didn't need that.
Yeah.
Wasn't something you focused on.
And so like I finally felt good and comfortable with myself. And it was just like unlocking this door to where it didn't matter what happened. Like everything's going to be all right. You know what I mean? And so.
And you had people around you that cared. You know, you got a wife and a son and daughter that want you to be who you want to be.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah. And then so I also, in doing that, my wife was still having kind of a hard time with a lot of things. And so I was like, hey, man, why don't, you know, this shit really helped for me. Why don't you look into it? And she was like open to that. And us dealing with things together and her dealing
able to lean on each other.
Yeah, and her dealing with things on her own. Like we haven't fought ever since. You know what I'm saying? Like we've had like little flare ups, but we haven't fought ever since. Yeah, no, definitely not. And we're both super happy. And
what's the name of your tattoo place?
Steel and Ink Studio.
Steel and Ink. I've looked it up, but I forgot. Yeah, Steel and Ink Studio. I want to ask you this: after all this has happened, because I mean, Shawn, you've had like so many different things that you could have definitely just stayed in the ditch. I mean, going back to Leavenworth could have put you and stayed in the ditch.
Yeah.
But in your life, growing up, and all the different things that you had to figure out how to adapt to, what do you think is your biggest takeaway from living through all this that you could tell other people about?
So, you know, like actually specifically related to that, I would say that my wife and I both have kind of shifted our platform on pretty much life in general. Okay. How we run our business, how we deal with our employees. We kind of like just everybody, family and everything. We kind of like have shifted into this idea of how everything we want to do, we want to create opportunity for other people.
Yeah.
To have a springboard,
which fills you up.
Yeah. And so like, you know, in the tattoo industry, for like a long time, it's always been kind of like, hey man, you don't bring you know, people in, you know what I mean? Like you have to kind of earn that shit. And, you know, it's kind of been like taboo to kind of show the craft to other people. But, you know, we kind of realized that the way things are now, and like the opportunity that we have to create abundance for other people is like real for us. You know what I mean? Like
you have the ability to do that.
Yeah. So, you know, like the thing, and I guess it's kind of the same thing, like what you're doing with this podcast is, I don't know about for everybody, but I know, for a lot of people, they need to hear, like, it's not just people who are on the outside who need to be able to relate to people who have been through the process that we've been through. But I think even more importantly, people who are still in that shit need to hear that
light at the end of the tunnel.
There's light at the end of the tunnel, and all it is choices. You know what I mean? Like, and accepting the help that is available.
And I think, Shawn, that's it. I was hoping you were getting to that, because I think that's your life. You had choices, and sometimes the choices weren't good, but at a point you somehow found something deep in your soul, and you found the right choice, and now you're living it. And man, what a world of difference it is for you.
Yeah.
Because you're an intelligent guy. I mean, you figured out the world of living in prison, and you figured out, hey, I'm going to take a chance on doing tattooing. You became really good at it. And you got out and you got, hit, between the eyes on people giving you no's on everything, and you didn't give up. And you finally, even though you kept going back and forth, you found it.
Yeah. You got to keep
it
pushing.
Can't give up. Can't give up. And you didn't. You at times felt like it. You came close. Hell, you could have died at Home Depot. But, somehow, some way you found it. And, we're at the end of this thing here, and I'm thinking it took you a while, but it was always in you. It was just putting it all together. Because you had bits and pieces all the way along. You just didn't have it where it all plugged in. And then something happened when you hit that rock bottom that said, okay, here. And Robert came, and you had, what is it, Phil?
Phil, yeah.
Yeah, and then those two things clicked for you at the moment that you needed the most. And like you said, you didn't even know that you had been holding all that in. And now you're helping people. And now you're paying it forward with people and showing them, an opportunity to get to the next step. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's cool stuff, Shawn. Really cool. I really appreciate you stopping by here and sharing this story, because I think for a lot of people, this is a familiar story that has all kinds of different chapters to it that you can almost fit yourself into a lot of the different chapters that you've lived. People are always fearful of, how do I get out? How do I, step out? And you've done that, and you're so honest about it too. I mean, you're talking about the paralysis. A lot of people have paralysis. They don't even realize they're in the routine, the bad routine that they're in. But, man, what a story. You need to write a book. You do. I mean, it's got all the elements to it. Okay, well, speaking of a book, that's a transition right there. I wrote a book, Nightmare Success. It's Loyalty, Betrayal, Life Behind Bars, Adapting, Finally Breaking Free. Check it out. Get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Everybody, love you guys subscribing. You can follow the show on Apple, on Spotify. Just got on Amazon Music. It's kind of fun. You can actually, if you've got an Alexa, you can say, Alexa, play Nightmare Success In and Out, and it'll play. I thought that was cool this weekend. So, yeah, Amazon Music's new, Odyssey. If you want to reach out to me, please leave me a review on Apple, Spotify. You got to go to the little 3 lines there, and it'll drop down. You got to then go scroll down where it says write a review. Love those. It helps the show. If you want to leave me a message, BrentCassidy.com. As I always used to say in my emails back to the world when I was at Leavenworth, stay strong, and I'll do the same. Shawn Medina, thank you, my man.
Right on. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Network Success, In and Out. Thanks, folks.